Hello dear crypto friends and welcome to this new video. I sincerely apologize for captivating your attention with this really stupid title and thumbnail, but I couldn't come up with a better idea and somehow I need to draw your attention because, you know, life of a YouTuber is hard. Anyways, let's get started and let's have a look at this weird market that is behaving strangely. We would like it to go to 100k, to 200k. Why isn't Bitcoin going to 200k? What is going on? Why is it taking so long? All the time the same questions. So let's get started with the charts before I talk even more weird. So we always start with this long-term history of the Bitcoin price. So logarithmic y-axis is necessary for Bitcoin or coins in general, because if you look at this in a linear fashion, then you can completely forget it. Let's deactivate the fit. I mean, you will not see anything that happened before. Look at this. I mean, you will just see the last few years, and everything that happened before is flat because it pales in comparison, of course, with absolute numbers compared to what happened now. So we need to always look at everything in logarithmic mode. I have a fitting function here, that is the long-term logarithmic regression. And this long-term logarithmic regression says that Bitcoin is getting less volatile, first of all, but that we also have diminishing returns. This means that we will not see huge rallies like the rallies in the beginning anymore. Like, we will not have these insane rallies anymore. The percentages are getting lower, so this is the law of diminishing returns, and also the cycles are getting longer. So longer cycles and less return, this is the law of diminishing returns. I have also opened the RSI and stochastic RSI, as the very intelligent viewers on this channel no doubt will immediately have seen, because as I've said last time, the viewers of this channel are super smart. Well, so what is happening in the market? We still see that not much has happened. I mean, I'm making updates and every time we just getting super weird stuff and we think, what the hell, not much has happened. We are still in this hilariously long running flat correction and we are just waiting for it to break out. But why is it not breaking out? Well, I will come to that in a minute. First of all, we can say that the RSI has still not done something super amazing. We are still in this long-term hidden bullish divergence. Meanwhile, the stochastic RSI has increased again, but now we are getting dumps on the weekly, so it's going down again. So this is kind of a weird behavior. This long sideways action is taking a lot longer than we would like. It's wobbling around and who knows for how much longer. But I think at some point it will stop wobbling around and will start rising more and ever more quickly, and then it will go berserk. Because that is usually how those bubbles form in the Bitcoin price chart. That's historically always been the case. It starts super slowly, wobbling around, and then woo, goes crazy, right? Here the same. It's wobbling around, doing weird stuff, and then suddenly, woo, it's going crazy. So the RSI and stochastic RSI are not really too helpful to understand what's happening in the market. We have to look at other things, and for this we have to start with the dollar index, because this dollar is just not stopping. The dollar is pumping and pumping and pumping. That's crazy. Look at this here. I mean, look at this. The dollar just will not stop pumping. Now, here it is interesting to look at the RSI and stochastic RSI, because it is quite obvious that we will see a correction sooner or later. Look, the dollar is just rising on the monthly chart here without any freaking correction, and I have been calling for a correction since a long time now, but it just doesn't want to correct. We had this small correction here in April and May 21, but since then it's just rising without any correction, like without any correction since basically a year now, right? And how many times in history has this happened, especially starting from the lower Bollinger Band and pushing up aggressively into the upper Bollinger Band? If we look at this historically, this has only happened once. I am not joking. I'm not joking. This has only happened once. It started in 95, yes, in 1995, and it just kept pushing upwards for like crazy for 7 years. That was the only time in history, as I can tell, if I look at the entire history of the dollar, which goes back in this chart to the 60s, the late 60s, this was the only time we had such a breakout where it started pumping directly from the lower Bollinger Band and pushing up into the upper Bollinger Band and just continuing into a brutal uptrend. This was the only time, because every time we had an uptrend, it started from when the Bollinger Band was very narrow. And when the Bollinger Band gets really narrow, so it's getting super narrower, then at some point it will break out. And this has happened here, as we can beautifully see, and it has also happened here in the early 80s, right? But every time here the Bollinger Band was super narrow, and when it wanted to break out from a wide Bollinger Band such as here or here or here, it every time got rejected, as we can see, right? It every time got rejected. And now this is the second time in history that the dollar just keeps pumping and doesn't want to correct. Now, why is that? Of course, we all know this has to do with the Fed. The Fed is raising the interest rates, and of course that leads to the dollar pumping like crazy. Everyone is now panicking. Everyone expects like 8 or 9 rate hikes this year. The Fed is super hawkish. They want to increase the interest rates because inflation is high. Of course, it's high, so they want to raise rates. But the expectation is that they are raising the rates 8 or 9 times this year. So this is super bullish for the dollar. The dollar is pumping like crazy, but it's bad for stocks, right? And the thing is this now. I think that at some point this has to reverse. The chart here is looking insane. Okay, if we look at the RSI, for example, it's making a crazy bearish divergence. Look at this. We have a price that is now on par with what it was in March 2015. But in March 2015, the RSI, the monthly RSI, was at 82. We are very far away from 82. We are at 65. So this is looking to me like a very strong bearish divergence. Also, this whole structure here is looking to me like a Wyckoff distribution pattern. Look at this here. This whole thing here is looking like a Wyckoff distribution pattern, and now it's making the last attempt here, and suddenly it will break down. Also, apart from the RSI, the stochastic RSI is speaking volumes. It's speaking volumes that we are super overbought. We are just crazy overbought. And look at this, the monthly RSI. How many times in history has it been so super overbought continuously at 100? It's if we look at this here, look at this. I will just close the RSI so that we can see the stochastic RSI better. Yeah, look at this here. We are pumping at 99, 98, 99, 100 since November 21, right? So since half a year now, we are at maximum stochastic RSI in the monthly. And how many times in history has this happened? This was the case in November 18. This was the case in February 15. This was the case in, yeah, here it was also in 1981, right? So this has happened only a few times. And let us look at what the price did then. Here we had a brutal 4 or 5 months correction in the early 80s. Of course, it continued with an uptrend, but at least we had a brutal 4 or 5 months correction. And if we would get a 4 to 5 months correction, this would of course mean that in this time Bitcoin would pump, because Bitcoin is inversely correlated to the dollar. And here, this was also the case in 2015. Okay, it was super overbought, and then it went just sideways slash dumping from March 2015 and had a low in May 2016. So it was 1 year of down sideways-ish movements. And then we had the same in November 18. In November 18, this is interesting because it managed to rise a bit more, but afterwards we had severe dumps. So no matter what it's doing, at some point we will have brutal dumps. This cannot continue pumping like this. And we have established on this channel that Bitcoin is strongly negatively correlated to the dollar index. If you don't believe me, I will now load Bitcoin as a comparison. Yeah, look at this. So we are now going to the weekly chart, and this is Bitcoin since it started trading in summer 2010 compared to the dollar index. And what do we see? We see that Bitcoin can only pump brutally, or it tends to only pump when the dollar index is falling, right? So in this whole time when it started trading, the dollar index was falling, and that's exactly what the time when Bitcoin was pumping the most. In 2013, this is the only exception that I see, because in 2013 the dollar index was rising and Bitcoin was rising. This was the time when there was the banking crisis in Cyprus and there was huge hype around Bitcoin, but Bitcoin was much smaller back then. It had a much smaller market cap, and thus it was easier to influence the price. But the second pump in 2013 was only when the dollar started dropping again. That's when the second brutal pump came. And then we had the dollar index pumping like crazy in 2014, 2015. And this was also when Bitcoin went into an insanely long and brutal bear market. Then this whole time the dollar index went sideways and it started pumping here. This was also a time when Bitcoin was pumping slightly. Why? Because that was the time when there was the halving in 2016. The halving in 2016 occurred around that time. So this is the reason why Bitcoin pumped despite the dollar pumping. But the last really strong pump only came when the dollar started dumping brutally. Then we had this long phase here where the dollar was creeping a bit higher, and in that whole time Bitcoin was also not achieving to make any significant new highs. Only when the dollar started dumping like crazy, that is the time when the last rally started from 10,000 to 65,000. And now the dollar index is rising again like crazy, and that is also the reason why Bitcoin is not doing anything interesting. It's like the last times, the rise of the dollar is kind of suppressing Bitcoin to make new all-time highs right now. So what does that mean? That first of all, it means that Bitcoin is super bullish, because normally it would fall. So as it was the case in 2014, when the dollar started brutally rising, we saw that Bitcoin went into this insanely long bear market in 2014 and 2015. It was no fun. I was there in Bitcoin during that time, and I can tell you it was absolutely no fun. Most of the people back then, I clearly remember it, thought that Bitcoin is dead and it will never rise again, and it will go to $50, $30, $20 now and will stay there forever. I can clearly remember it was insane, an insane time. So the fact that the dollar is rising now, as we see, so strongly, but Bitcoin is not going into a brutal bear market, that should make us super bullish. That indeed means that Bitcoin is insanely bullish, and that Bitcoin wants to actually make new all-time highs, but the aggressively rising dollar is preventing it from doing so. So it's just waiting for this opportunity for the dollar to fall so that it suddenly can start rising again and make new all-time highs. That's what Bitcoin is waiting for. Now, will this happen? Will the dollar start dumping? I think yes. Why? Because I think there's a lot of expectation for insane rate hikes. The rate hikes are priced into this dollar rise. Everyone is expecting the Fed to just keep on rising the interest rate until the whole economy will crash. Because the dollar is not only inversely correlated to Bitcoin, but also inversely correlated to stocks, to the stock market. So everyone is expecting the Fed to just brutally dump the whole stock market and that we go into a recession because the Fed will just keep on pumping the interest rates. Guys, I think this will not happen. The Fed normally does not want to crash the entire market. And also this would be too easy. Let us look at the Nasdaq. We see that the Nasdaq is correcting again and everyone is super bearish. Let's go into the daily chart. Everyone is super bearish now, but the fact alone that everyone is super bearish should make us skeptical. If every noob, every retail investor now expects a huge stock market crash because the Fed is raising the interest rates, Do you really think it's so easy? Do you think that the stock market will really crash now when everyone expects it? I think not. I think the opposite will happen. I think suddenly the Fed will announce, because the inflation data looks better than they thought, and they will say, maybe we will not raise as aggressively this year as we announced. We'll make only, 5 interest rate hikes or whatever. They will be not as hawkish, they will be more dovish than they announced, and everyone will be like, what? Insane, let's go into stocks again. And then suddenly stocks will pump like crazy and we will make new all-time highs. That is my belief, that something like this will happen, because it's just too easy when every newbie thinks that the stock market is going to crash and that the Fed will crash the stock market. I don't think this will be the case. We said also many times that there is a very strong similarity to 1929, and we compared it many times to the 1929 stock market bubble. And in this 1929 crash, this is the green chart here, we also had this weird sideways period where it was wobbling around, and then the last final push. And I think this is what will happen now. We are wobbling around, right? We are wobbling around at this level here, and then when no one expects it, we get this insane last final push here. And this will also coincide with the top in Bitcoin. So that is the reason why Bitcoin is not pumping yet, okay? Because the dollar is just pumping too much. Let's go again into the Bitcoin index. Let's look again at the Bitcoin all-time history index and into our long-term channel. So where are we now? Well, if we look at the daily chart, we can see that the long-term lower trend line is not so far away anymore from where we actually are now. It's at 25,000, which is kind of hilarious. That already now we are in the lower half of this long-term trend channel. So if Bitcoin starts rising, and I think this is very likely, but I cannot as always guarantee it, if Elon Musk will now pump Bitcoin to 500k confirmed, okay, it's confirmed. Okay, it might be that I'm completely inventing this stuff. Okay, yes, could be, okay, could be, okay. But nevertheless, if now Bitcoin starts pumping, because as I said, the dollar is very likely to correct sooner or later, massively. The dollar will correct massively at some point in the near future, starting in the next weeks to a few months tops. And then this will be the time when Bitcoin starts rising, and will go to the upper trend line of this long-term channel. And we have calculated multiple times on this channel, I don't want to repeat the calculation, that the top in this cycle will be in December this year. Okay, in December 2022, we will see the top of this market cycle. And where will this top then be? Well, the top in December is at 230,000, but this is not an exact science. It could be in October, it could go a few different ways. It could take longer, to January, February 23. But it could be faster, and it could be already over in October 22. This depends on when the dollar will start dumping and how aggressively it will start dumping. That's what it depends upon. So we cannot precisely foresee the future, but we can say with a quite high likelihood this is what's going to happen. Of course, we cannot exclude the possibility that the Fed are crazy bastards and that Powell will just continue aggressively hiking and just crazy pumping up the Fed fund rate. Let us open the Fed fund. So this is the good old Fed fund rate, and we see it's already starting to rise again. The interest rates are starting to rise, and we are not entirely convinced that this will make insane new highs, because we see a clear trend in the last decades. The rates went never as high up again as before, right? And if now the Fed will just raise like crazy to I don't know 5, 6, 7% interest rates, then sure, the whole calculation, everything what I said is wrong, because then the stock market will brutally implode and crash, and Bitcoin will be dragged down with it. Then this whole thing will be wrong. But do you really think that the Fed will want to destroy the American economy Do you think they want to destroy the economic growth of the United States? I don't think so. I think as soon as the inflation data starts to get better, which might be surprisingly sooner than most people expect, as soon as that happens, they will say, okay guys, we will not raise as aggressively. Maybe we were a bit too hawkish. We will pull back a bit now and we will raise only 5 times or 4 times instead of 8 or 9 times. And this is when the market will go crazy. This is when stocks will start picking up. Everyone will go into stocks. Everyone will go like crazy into the stock market again and into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So because they are positively correlated. We also established this quite a few times on this channel. So this is when Bitcoin will start massively pumping. I expect this will happen within the next, I think, 2 months. Within the next 2 months, I expect Bitcoin will start pumping like crazy because stocks will start pumping like crazy because the good old Fed will say, we will not pump as aggressively as we have announced, right? So this is the situation right now. We need to have a bit more patience. And of course, this means that the whole crypto market will pump. So this is the altcoin chart. These are all altcoins without Bitcoin, right? And we see that they are making a really beautiful wedge, rising wedge structure. They want to break higher because the RSI also here. Now some S. Are we finished now? Why do these people always start drilling holes when I want to record something? Honestly, what is going on? So the altcoins are making a super strong bullish divergence, right? We have higher lows here and we have lower lows in the RSI. So let's try. I'm gonna search for this guy now, and I don't know what. So let's try this again. The RSI is making lower lows, whereas the price is making higher lows. This means that we have a super strong hidden bullish divergence in the altcoin market. And this in turn means that they are just waiting for an opportunity to go completely crazy. And when will this happen? This will of course happen when Bitcoin starts rising aggressively. But of course we know that there's always a delay between the rise of Bitcoin and the rise of the altcoins. Last time we looked at different coins, but I didn't look at ETH, and this is of course a sin. I must look at ETH and let us find out where ETH is headed. ETH is in the super long-term trend channel, and as we can see, it's making consistent new highs. It has been rising in union with Bitcoin. The target for this cycle for ETH, I have the feeling that it's going to be, let's look at some Fibonacci retracements. It's gonna be, in my opinion, 25,000. The full Fibonacci extension, the 4.236 extension, is at 25,000. And that's what I think will be the top of this cycle. So ETH will at some point start rising, and together or shortly after Bitcoin have the top of the cycle, probably at around 25,000. Sounds insane now, but these are coins, friends. This is coin land. ETHBTC, on the other hand, is also rising compared to Bitcoin, but it's rising in a weird and long-term way this time. It's looking a lot different than the rise from 2015 to 2017. It's looking a lot different. It's just creeping upwards. It's creeping upwards, creeping upwards. And here we also can see a nice hidden bullish divergence. The price, as compared to Bitcoin, is making higher lows, but we have lower lows in the RSI, as we can see, hidden bullish divergence. So I can only assume that this triangle or triangle-like structure or flag, bull flag structure that it's making will at some point break to the upside. It's wobbling around and then bam, it's breaking to the upside. So target for Ethereum this cycle, $25,000. Call me crazy, but that is the target for this cycle. In my opinion, that's only my opinion. I might be wrong. Anyway, friends, that was it for today. We are headed for 230,000 with Bitcoin by the end of the year. I still maintain this picture. And yes, that was it, friends. Okay, that was it. I'm stopping this video now because I'm running out of things that I can say, and it's getting weirder and weirder. So I hope you had a bit of fun. I always have fun doing these videos, and see you next time, dear friends of cryptocurrencies.